when you, typically the purest definition of code switching is that you have people who speak multiple languages, and when they speak the same multiple languages, which ones will they use under which circumstances? But code switching can include switching between dialects. So if you were to have a fancy Scottish butler, you know, in his usual life, he's very, 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 very formal, and then he gets home and he says to his wife, "Aye, get your buttons in the oven," right? He starts talking to her that way. He's code switching. He's switching between his formalized speech that he uses at work to his informal, intimate speech he would use with his wife. That's still considered code switching. And all of us have a fairly extensive repertoire of codes we can switch between. The question is, when is it appropriate? And it's never haphazard. It's never an accident when you code switch. So we were talking about last week, there are times when academic English is going to serve you better, or more formalized English is going to serve you better. But the idea that there is just one way to speak English is incorrect. Right? There are lots of ways, and lots of different ways that one might identify. So there's a way you talk to your friends that you wouldn't talk to me. I always find it funny that, you know, a student will come up and start asking me questions, and you can see them stumbling over words they don't typically use because they're trying to use their most formal language, which can sometimes create some hilarious word choices, right? Things that they don't realize what they're saying at all. And you just kind of go, oh, I'm sure you've sometimes seen responses in maybe blog posts or a comment underneath someone's video where you're like, you don't actually know what that means, do you? Okay, fine. Now, sometimes our code switching is a part of our ethnic identity. So we have, of course, Southern English, right? Southern English is an ethnic identity, being from the South. Heck, we're using it. And of the dialects in the United States that are stigmatized, Southern English, very stigmatized, right? Let's assume that that person is not very bright. And then Black English, which has taken many names. It's been called ASE, African Standard English. It's been called BSE, Black Standard English. It's been called AASE, African American Standard English. What it is never called is Ebonics. Okay, that is a no-go word. People who speak Standard English, which is often perceived to be white English. It's not specific to color, but it is specific to usage areas. And people who speak quote-unquote Standard English often say that Black English is incorrect and it uses incorrect grammar and therefore is a lower type of English. Actually, it does not use incorrect grammar. The grammar is totally correct for its own language. It is just as Japanese is a perfectly valid language with its own grammar, and if you look at its grammar, you'd say, no, that's not right. Your subject-verb order is incorrect. It's incorrect for English. It's totally correct for Japanese. Black Standard English has absolutely very specific, very repeatable grammatical rules. They are not incorrect. It's just another variant of English. That's all. So it's a perfectly valid form of language. Does that mean that someone should be, that someone may not get stigmatized for using it? Nope, absolutely. They'll still get stigmatized for using it. But it is never, ever assumed that it is a lesser form of language. It is not. Now, status in speech. We have ways of addressing people, right? You call me doctor, but I call you by your first name. What does that tell you about our social status? What does that tell you about our power? Right, absolutely. I have more power. We have become less formalized in this over the years. If you go back 100 years, husbands and wives called each other by their last names in public. I'm sure you've seen or read books where they call each other by their last names. Oh, Mrs. Mansica, oh, Mr. Mansica, right? And they would refer to each other that way. It seems silly, but a first name was your Christian name, and it was an intimate thing to call someone by that name. Something that you did privately, and certainly not something you'd ever assume to do, ever. With your husband or your wife, you could do it at home. You wouldn't do it anywhere else. And when we run around and we're like, hey, call me John, right? That would have been so weird 100 years ago. So weird. We all would have been last name only, which I think is kind of funny. We still do this at home. I would periodically turn to my husband and I would like, Mr. Mansica? I was like, Mrs. Mansica? I said, would you be so kind as to gather the children? And he'll say, yes, of course, Mrs. Mansica. And we're laughing about formalization that is just not, not there. Obviously, you're like, Mrs. Mansfield, that's my married name. I never use it. So only socially, because when I get invitations, people don't know how to, because of this social status. It's unusual for the woman to have a higher social status than her husband, right? My husband is Mr. Mansica. I am Dr. Gray. So when people send like for the wedding invitations and they really go formal on it, they don't know what to put down because it should be Dr. Richard Gray or Dr. Richard and Alexis Gray, but because it doesn't work that way, it's Dr. Gray, Dr. Alexis Gray, Mr. Richard Mansica. Right, and that freaks them out. So I'm just like, you know what, for a wedding, I can be Mrs. Mansica, I'm fine with that. It's a wedding. But people kind of freak out because it lowers my social hierarchy. And you know how I feel about being Mrs. Anybody, right? I'm perfectly happy to be somebody's wife. I shouldn't have to subsume my identity and my education just so I'm someone's wife. So, historical linguistics, which by the way, this for the most part bores the crap out of me, I will totally admit, you're looking at how languages change over time. And we're looking at language and language patterns. Things like, there is an origin language to English and German and Latin and even Farsi. And all of those languages come together under something called Proto-Indo-European. And there are arguments about where was this language, where did it originate? Did it originate in Eastern Anatolia? Did it originate in Kurdistan? Oh, so many arguments. There were three people who really used to beat this to the ground: Colin Renfrew, Paul Friedrich, and Maria Gimbutas. But Paul Friedrich has died, so is Maria Gimbutas. We're left with Colin Renfrew, so he's currently the winner. So since he outlived everybody, the current idea is that English, or the Proto-Indo-European, so the birth language of all of these languages, is about 7,000 BCE, so about 9,000 years old. There was an origin language that we all share. So this is going to include all the Romance languages, which is all the Latinates, Italian, French, and Spanish, and then all the Germanics, which includes English. I don't know if you know this, but English comes from German. And then the Romanic languages. These are your sort of in between Slavic / Ukrainian kind of languages, and then the Hellenics are the Greek languages, which may include some earlier versions of Sanskrit, but most of Sanskrit comes from Indo-Iranian, which English is related to Sanskrit as well because we have to share some origin language. So, if you look at the Proto-Indo-European, it spreads out this side, way over here, Indo-Iranian, which goes into Farsi and Kurdish and Bengali and Hindu and Urdu, and Gujarati, which is all from Sanskrit, and the Hellenics are all Greeks. The Celtic languages, it's actually there's a dead one in there that they didn't show you, and yeah, a couple of dead ones. There were at least 3 or 4 what we would call Gothic Gaelic, and they are gone. They are gone, baby, gone. But the Manx, Irish, the Scottish, the Welsh, over here is what we now call Well, the Manx almost nobody speaking, but the Irish would be the more Gaelic version of what we understand now to be Gaelic. So we do share an origin language, but we split off so very long ago that we don't recognize words from each other. Like right now, somebody who was speaking Farsi or Kurdish or Urdu in this room, not one word would you pick up as a Cockney. Not one word would be the same. In the Irish and the Welsh and the Gaelic, not one word would you recognize as a word you know. But now we get to the italics, which are the Romantics, and you start picking up words, right? You've heard words in French that sound the same as the word you know, or words in Spanish, or Italian, Portuguese, any of those. You'll hear those, and they'll sound familiar. Now you'll notice, by the way, that English over here seems to have two sets of terms. We'll get there in a second. Then, of course, here's all the Slavics, which would be all the Russians and the Croatian, all that stuff. Although, note that Romanian stays over here. Okay. The Germanic languages are the North Germanic, which is the ones that all become your, I like to think of them as your Scandinavian languages. Your Old Norse, which dies away and gives way to what we now know as Icelandic and Norwegian and Swedish. If you listen to someone who's speaking Finnish, Swedish, Icelandic, any of those, you will probably get a word, maybe two, but most of it you're just going to be like, nope, kind of in a different way. Now I speak German, so when I listen to all the Scandinavians, I can usually pick up about one word out of 20. But that's about it. And I have to really like adjust the phonetics to make it sound right. Then we get the West Germanics, and here we end up with High German, which is German and Yiddish. Yiddish is a combination of Hebrew and German. And the Old Dutch, which is all the Dutchy Dutch. So you get Afrikaans, which is in South Africa, the Flemish and the Dutch, which you're going to find in Holland. I can usually understand probably 1 in 20 of those as well. And now over here we got what we call Anglo-Frisian. Now why is it called Anglo-Frisian? The reason is that, okay, so England. Let's do a little history lesson here for a second. England. Have you ever been there? Yeah, it's a freaking island, a very big island. And then there's this continent that's attached to it. There's a map right there if you'd like to see it. All right, so for some reason, not terribly interesting to the rest of Europe. I don't know, maybe it was because it was cold, who knows. But periodically, almost like there was a timetable to it, groups would come over and conquer them. First came the Romans, right? And they basically beat the shit out of the Celts, right? And then they left. And then came the Germans. And then they really beat the crap out of the people who were there. The existing, they called themselves Gauls. So the existing Celtic folks that were there, they handed them their asses completely. So the language they spoke was a combination of Old English, Gaelic, and then German. And then, enough time passes, the language becomes something unto itself. You recognize this language as Middle English. If you ever had to read Beowulf, oh God, right? You're like, this, it's like watching your own language underwater from a distance, right? You're like, I don't know what's happening. I can almost understand you, but not exactly. This is hard. So, time passes, and for some freaking reason, the French decide they want that space too. So they show up, they beat the crap out of the English again. This is about the time of Chaucer, about Canterbury Tales, right? So they beat the shit out of the English, and they dump French all over the language. Basically, they kind of urinate French through the language, but they don't stay long enough to make it stick. It just kind of puts this Frenchy coating on stuff. And the way I see it was the French were like, meh, this place is going. I don't like the food. Gone, right? But they left their unmistakable stamp on the language. We have Frenchy words that we just don't have any other word for. We still RSVP to shit. Right? Respondez-vous s'il vous plaît. That's what those letters stand for. Respondez-vous s'il vous plaît. Respond you, please. That's what that says. That's what RSVPing is. Right? We still say rendezvous. That is a French word. Right? Do we have a word for rendezvous in English? Yes, but not exactly. If I say, hey, I have a meeting with this guy, that sounds okay. If I say, hey, I have a rendezvous with this guy, we're like, sexy. It has that, that additional sexy component. Thank you to the French. So we end up with this language we've got now, which starts becoming the language we've got now in the time of Shakespeare. Remember I told you about Creoles and that sort of universal human grammar, and that Shakespeare was in it? Very good, Chomsky, just go with me on this. The way his sentences are constructed, you can tell that intonation is important. He uses intonation instead of word order. In our English now, we have a very specific way you construct a sentence. You've got subject, verb, object. The subject's got to be a noun, and the object's got to be a noun. In between, you can have some verbs and some adverbs, but there's got to be, and you've got rules about how it goes. The rules were a little looser then. And even tenses were a little bit nuts. Like, if you, Friday was Talk Like a Pirate Day, right? Pirates absolutely speak Creole. It's awesome. It's Creole English. Only the pirates of our imagination. Remember, pirates have extended all the way through. There are pirates in Somalia now, and I assure you that they don't shiver anyone's timbers or they'll let pieces of hate. The reason we think pirates talk like that is because the first film that had sound, the first talkie, was, not the first, but among the first, was Long John Silver in Treasure Island. The guy who was Long John Silver came from a place in England where language hadn't changed much in about 400 years. In fact, they still spoke English the way Shakespeare did. He was from a little village. And then he went and became a stage star. And from that point, we think all pirates sound like that. So we're like, hey, arr, me, I tell you true. Oh, what a fine boy you were. Right? Well, that's all this guy and that village and, Elizabethan England. It's just like he was this great time capsule of English. And because of that, we think that's talking like a pirate. All pirates sound like this dude from that village. I love it. Talk like a pirate day. Really, we're talking like this village day. Or speaking Elizabethan day. Or at least the closest approximation you can make that. How funny is that? That's the only part of historical linguistics I give a crap about. The rest of it I'm like, oh wait, hold on. Nope, I'm back. Oop, no, I'm back. I hate it. It's so boring. I spent almost 6 months learning it. So, globalization of language, and of course, globalization of language is happening constantly. What's one of the driving forces of globalization of language, of sort of attempting to homogenize language? Okay, aside from looking at these, what's some of the effect? Okay, how do people learn English in non-English speaking countries? Television, right, school and television. Okay, who produces the most television? America. The BBC produces the best television. We produce the most television. Right, so our way of speaking, our linguistic stamp is just being poured all over everywhere, right? Then you start having this idea of prestige of the language speaker. We have all this stuff. We have all this power. Speak the language of the most power, right? So what we start seeing is a loss in linguistic diversity, not just in English, but in all languages, where see a focus on the group that has the most power, so languages get lost. Remember Franz Boas, his whole goal was like salvage anthropology, and there are linguists who are still doing salvage anthropology trying to save these diminishing languages, but not everybody wants it. And then sometimes they do. Sometimes we end up with revitalization and preservation. Like among the Inuit in Alaska, there are whole movements to start teaching Inuit and other native languages back to the kids who now only learn English from, Maury Povich. Now, this is a reading question. I sure hope you did it. Deborah? Then we have skipped chapter 5 and moved on to chapter 6. So, we are in chapter 6, race and racism. This is on your exam. This week, your exam will went all the way through to the end of this chapter. Now, race and racism, you may ask, why is this so important? And the answer is because it's so freaking important. It's important because, and you may wonder, why are you talking about it in every class? It's because it's not an issue we have solved as a culture. All right, this is not something that's just over because all of us would like it to be over. Like, we're all like, oh, God, I'm so tired of this topic, right? Except that we still do, and sometimes hold very uninformed opinions about things. So my job as your professor is to help your opinion at least be more informed. Most of us inherently are not, and I say most of us, are inherently not haters on any deep level. But we almost all of us still make stupid mistakes that are the result of what can be very easily classified as racism. If you do something like you walk into your math class, and you look around, and like 80% of your math class is Asian. Right, and you go, shit. Right, this class is graded on a curve. What's going to happen to me? You didn't mean any harm by that. You weren't like, I hate Asian people. You were like, those people are better than me at this thing. Now, you made that decision by looking at their hair color and their eye shape. Yeah, a polygenic trait. Okay, so just so you know, Asian people also typically have white earwax that is flaky. Yeah, okay, just go with me here for a second. White, flaky, dry earwax as opposed to the other options which are orange, yellow, brown, sticky. Okay. You would never decide someone was better than you at math based on earwax. Right? You would never walk into a class and be like, shit, earwax. These people are so smart. Right? Or you wouldn't decide that they drive poorly based on earwax. But you look at their eye shape and their hair color and you go, oh, I've made some decisions about these people. It's equally as stupid. It is equally as stupid. And again, we're not inherently horrible people who are like, I will judge all people who don't look like me. And we do. All the time. We hold stereotypes that we go, oh, it's funny because it's true. Like Carlos Mencia would not have a job if we didn't hold these ideas. Chris Rock, no one would think he was funny. Jeff Foxworthy would be fixing trucks if we didn't hold these stereotypes. And because we hold them and we all pretend we don't, right? Like we're all like, oh, no, I don't have stereotypes. Yeah, of course you do. Every single person has a stereotype about what the other is. So when we see the other doing the thing, we go, oh, see, it's funny because it's true. Those people do that. When you see someone who looks like you do the exact same thing, you go, oh, that guy's a jerk. Right? Somebody cuts you off on the freeway and they're Asian. You go, see? Somebody cuts you off on the freeway, they look like you, and you're like, asshole! Right? Bad scientists, we really are. And so, as much as this kills me to do this, I hate this part of the lecture, but let's do this. Let's talk about some of the stereotypes that we hold. Where we go, oh, it's funny because it's true. Let's start with white people, because you know they start first on everything anyway. So, what are some ideas you can go ahead. This is a safe room. This is a comfortable, safe room. All right. What are some ideas that we hold about white people?
They enunciate every word.
They enunciate every word. If you want to sound as white as possible, make sure that you get every consonant to be sure. Now, I have, in fact, become this white woman more than once. I will completely, and we've all had a moment where we were like, oh my God, I'm a walking stereotype. It happened to me in Jamaica. So I got off the plane in Jamaica, and it wasn't even through customs yet, okay? I was picking up my bags. My husband had wandered off because that's how he do. You leave him alone, he just, and he's gone. He's probably thinking about Spider-Man or something of equal importance. It's adorable most of the time. But I don't see him, and this gentleman comes up to me and he says, are you gonna see Bob Marley, Mom? And I know Bob Marley's dead. And I was like, no. And he said, Bob Marley. Are you gonna see Bob Marley while you're here, girl? And I was like, oh, the place he lived is also in Jamaica. Perhaps he's offering me a tour. And I said, I don't think so. Maybe. And then he leans forward and he says, the ganja. You want the ganja? And I clutched an invisible set of pearls I didn't know I was wearing. I suddenly was like, no! No, sir, I do not smoke ganja. I work for the sheriff's department. They test my hair. No, thank you. Oh, no. I turn around now, I can see my husband. He's rolling with laughter on the other side of the bag. He cannot stop laughing. He was like, how you doing there, white girl? I said, I know, right? Oh my God, I suddenly became that woman. You know, the one with the stick jam so far up her ass, she can't do it. Like, I became that woman. And he was like, it's in all of us. I know, but it was really embarrassing. So some other ideas we have about white people. They love mayo. We also think that there are two kinds, right? We've got
Valley and trashy.
right. We've got the ones with the money and the ones without the money, right? And sometimes the ones without the money can cross over and become money ones, but we still think they carry the trash on them. Right? Like, let's take Anna Nicole Smith. Right? She brought all that trash with her. When she died, everybody was like, yeah. That's how trash died. All of us shit. So we are here in Norco. What do we think about the white people locally in Norco? Right? They're rednecks / bubbas. Right? They have cars that are, or houses that are mobile and cars that aren't. You know that they had to have invented the toothbrush because anyone else would have called it the teeth brush. They have sex with their sisters and meth lab on every corner.
Yeah.
Three-legged dogs. My personal favorite is the hair, the bumper hair, like the mullet for guys, but for girls it's the hair.
The poof.
Right? The bigger the hair, the sadder the story. Right? Or the closer to Jesus. You go either. Right? They usually have a weeping commitment to Jesus. Right? Just, Jesus is my Lord and Savior. Oh, save me, Jesus, right? We think of these people, we know exactly, we all are like, my neighbor. Oh my God, my neighbor. I know that person. They send out little angels as chain letters to your email. What else are they? What kind of food do they eat besides, okay, so the white trash eats Wonder Bread and spray cheese and tomato. You know no other group would have come up with spray cheese. All right, now they're also, if they're the rich kind, they have every opportunity from the moment they're born. If you are a white male from this group and you don't succeed, you are a complete douchebag. Because you had every available opportunity and you still do, and yet you fail. So, oh no, those guys are terrible. Those people are the ones who make jokes like, oh, first world problems, hashtag. Oh no. Those are the ones that when the girls get drunk, what's white girl wasted, my friends? Does white girl wasted often involved? Somehow your shirt came off and you're not sure how. Throw a white girl a pair of beads, instant boobs. Right, they're the ones where, I love you. Right, white girl wasted. That is white girl wasted. Right? Okay. Oh, and pumpkin spice lattes, that's right.
Pumpkin spice is my life.
I know. Right?
It's so good.
Okay.
So pumpkin is my life.
Okay, right? All right, that's kind of a problem. Oh, and there's one other thing. Every guy who is of color knows that if you want a blowjob, the girl you better look for is a white girl. Surprise! We are absolutely rumored to be the easiest when it comes to getting a BJ. You want to know what people think about you? Now you know. Okay, so, who's next? Who wants to be next?
Black overweight.
Okay, that's it. We'll get the blacks overweight. All right, so what do we think about black people?
Fried chicken all day.
Watermelon and grape Kool-Aid. Right, grape
It's
Kool-Aid.
red Kool-Aid. You have to call it by the color, not the name.
Hey, was it?
You have to call it by the
Grape aid?
It's always purple Kool-Aid or red Kool-Aid.
Okay, purple or red Kool-Aid, right? We also believe they have the biggest penises. We believe they are strapping it into their stomach. I have seen one who told me he was half Japanese and half black.
Contradiction.
And I said, of course. Which half? Say you're half anything gives the idea that there's pure anything, and that right there is the slippery slope to racism. And so I said, which half? And he says, oh, it works like this. This half is black. Why? Because what is he telling us? Japanese people are smart and black people are hot. Right? That's what he's telling us. Now, what kind of jobs can you have if you're a black male? Drug dealer, rap artist, and a professional athlete, oh yeah, and president. All right, what else can you be? Incarcerated, what else? What if you're a black female?
You're ratchet automatically.
Whoa, yeah, hairdressers. I actually heard this once on campus in an economics class. I walked past and the economics professor was like, well, we know that black women spend more money on their hair and on their fingernails than on their children. And I just kind of went, did you really just, please tell me you follow that up with this shenanigans. And instead he was like, so really they should be better with their finances so as not to be on welfare. And I was like, what is your name? You don't need to work here anymore.
So we believe that they're all wearing extensions. I can tell you as a white woman, what we believe about black women is inherently they are stronger than we are on all levels.
Yes.
Right? They take no shit from nobody. Right? I learned something. One evening I accidentally went to Black Girl Yoga. It was awesome. So here's what happened. I was on a date with a guy who didn't show up. Right, okay, so we had been dating on and off for months, and we had had a horrific breakup, and he said, just the things that every girl wants to hear is, I'm so sorry, and I want to tell you how sorry and how wrong I was. Oh, I'm listening. Right, he tells me to meet him at the Cheesecake Factory in Marina Del Rey, where he's going to sail his boat up, dock it, and we'll eat. Okay. I didn't know he had a boat, but okay. Right, so I wait. And he's about 20 minutes late at this point, and the maitre d' comes and says, your date just told me, he just called in, he's having engine problems, but he'll be here soon. Okay. So I wait. I waited 4 hours. Right. But in the meantime, I got one of the most valuable educations in being a woman I have ever had. Because while I sat there, by the way, the only white person in the entire restaurant, while I sat there at this Cheesecake Factory, woman after woman was like, are you still waiting on that man? And I'm like, I am. Girl, you don't wait for him. Every black boy knows a white girl will wait for him. You don't wait for him. You leave. And another girl was like, how much shit you taking from him? I'm like, well, this is the 3rd time around. I'm a slow learner. And they're like, no, you don't. And it was like one girl after another. So finally I gave up and went inside to eat because I was starving. And I was at this table by myself. They sat me in the direct middle of the room. Right, with every woman looking over going, right, so sad. And there were these 2 teenagers next to me who were like pooling their pennies together to order an appetizer. And I was like, no. Order what you guys want, it's fine. And they were like, really? I'm like, yeah, it's fine. Just order what you want. I remember being your age. Just please eat. And they were like, do you want to sit with us? I was like, nope, I'm going to just sit here and wallow. That's what I'm going to do. And I wait, and some time passes, and he walks into the restaurant. Everybody knows he's with me. He's the only other white guy. Now, I should tell you that he used to be a model, so he's a fairly good-looking guy anyway. And he walks in, and he's just kind of... Right? He's almost got like a fan going. Like, this is all happening. And I look over at him, and I'm like... And he doesn't even look at me. Now, again, only white girl in the entire restaurant. Not hard to find. Eye glove. Right? No. So he walks right past me, gets a seat, and sits down on the other end. The whole restaurant goes, oh, no, he didn't. And I'm like, and all the women are like, go. You tell him, right? Even the teenage girls are like, you tell him right now. And I was like, yes, ma'am. So I get up and I walk over to him and I stand there and I'm like, a few minutes? And he was like, well, props to you for still being here. Oh. And I was like, right, exactly. Oh, and all the women are like, so I'm looking at them for my cue because I've never been in this situation before. I have no playbook. And they're like, okay. And I was like, all right. So yeah, I've eaten, and here's my bill. I brought it over with me when I walked over. I said, you'll be picking up the bill for those 2 nice girls over there too, because they were hungry, keeping me company, waiting for you. And he was like, fair enough. I said, good, well then I'm leaving. And he was like, but I didn't bring a car. The boat's broken. And I was like, oh, I'm sorry. And I laughed, right? And the whole restaurant goes, yay! And I was like, thank you for my education, ladies. I won't be forgetting you anytime soon. Right? And I left. It was great. Right? It was actually. So, what do we think about black women? They're sassy.
Very.
And a little scary too, right? Because they will say anything. softer. Not at all. They are not afraid of you. All right. What else do we know about black people and food? They love it, right? Yeah, absolutely. They spend all their time. What about black people and religion? They're all Baptists, right? They are all holy rollers, every single one of them. Okay. Well, okay, Mexicans. It's your turn. First of all, where is Mexico?
Behind the door.
Here. And here. 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 I mean, we all speak Mexican, right? Mexican. Maybe some over here. Spain? I can't quite. Oh no, I didn't know where it was. Here it is. Spain also, right? They're Spanish, they're Mexican, these are Latinos, huh? So, what do we know about Hispanics?
Their moms beat them with sandals.
Chacas. No,
Why am I so racist today?
right. You're, oh my God, you lost me culture too, because I've said it to a cat. It's fine. It's fine. You're channeling your black woman. So we think that their moms beat them with sandals. We think that they put way too many people in a car that are supposed to be in a car, right? We think they eat rice and beans with every meal. They all speak Spanish. Oh yeah, and they're all illegal. All of them. All of them. All of them. Illegal. All of them. Right? We think there are a million of them. And they're all named Juan and Maria. They're all Catholic. They practice no birth control. Their young women are beautiful, but their older women are all fat because they know how to cook, right? Every single one's got this abuela somewhere. Somebody knows how to make tamales. Somebody. What else do we know about them?
They drive crappy cars.
They drive crappy cars. So weirdly, a lot of them look a little a sticker of a rooster. If you're looking for, I don't know why immigration has such a hard time with it. If you're looking for Mexicans, where do you go?
Home Depot.
Home Depot, right? I don't understand this. Or you go to the park on Sunday. You get whole families at the park on Sundays, multiple generations all in the park on Sunday.
To get a job.
Where?
I'm the corners, so some of them are trying to pick up work.
Yeah, oh, well, that's a Home Depot. That's why they asked the same thing. Although Target is apparently. All right, so yeah, everybody's illegal. So if you're brown, you just got here, right? Okay, and if you're brown, you automatically speak Spanish. How many of you have ever, just because you were brown, somebody walks up to you and starts like, you know, Canada, and you're like, my name is Paul. I don't speak Spanish. And they look at you like, could you? What's wrong with you for not speaking Spanish? So what else do we know? Let's see, I think that, well, we won't bring that up.
Bring it up.
Bring it up, dude.
Guys, why don't you practice circumcision? Like every single one of you is like sneaking a sock. So, you know, we know you're Mexican. This is going to be the hooded adventure. All right, so what else do we know? Okay, that's it. Let's leave Mexicans alone because now it's time for Middle Easterners, you terrorists. All of you are just waiting. Like, you got, now admittedly there are times when it's good to be friends with you because you all know how to get a deal, like on anything. And that cousin whether I need oil, camels, or a new rug, you got a deal. Now we're not sure where the Middle East is. Middle.
A little bit after Africa.
It's kind of like here. Check it. I'm not sure about India, right? Because you're like, India? No. Pakistan, yes. Okay, well, Pakistan is right here, right? And then we go, okay, Afghanistan for sure, right? What about Kyrgyzstan? It's in the sand. Right? In the sand. Turkey, sure. And for sure, like Iran, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, Yemen. Yemen sounds Middle Eastern, right? So now we're starting to get into Africa, but it's okay, it's all Middle East. But weirdly, if you go up, not the Middle East. Not even Greece. And most people come, they're not. They're European. Right? Okay. What things do we know? They're all Muslims.
Never get on an airplane with one. Never get on an airplane with one.
Never get on an airplane with them. By the way, you should know all Muslims is actually not true. Like Lebanon, for example, 60% Eastern Orthodox Catholics.
Really?
Yeah, really. Catholics. Whole nation of them. The things you don't know about the Middle East would fill an ocean. In fact, we've been at war with who? Iraq. Can you tell me where it is on a map, really?
Yes.
No, most of you can't. Is it the big one or the little one next to each other? Right? It's the little one. We've been in war with the little one. Most of us can't even find it. We've been in war for how long?
12 years.
Right, and we know those people are animals, but we don't know where they are. Right? No, they're not animals, guys. They're just people we went to war with. So, what else do we know about them? What about their women?
They just wear this.
They're probably sexy as hell.
Right? Well, actually, we have some idea about some of the women. What do we think about Iranian women? And wait, let's call them what they call themselves here, Persians, which is interesting because that's like me as a German calling myself an Ottoman. But that's all right. It's fine. The Persians. What do we know about Persians? They make good rugs. They're what? They drive Mercedes. Everything's covered in gold. Right? Like it's just golden everywhere. So much Baroque. If it ain't Baroque, fix it. Right? What else do we know about them? Wow, it turns out you guys know nothing. Okay. How do they smell?
Oh, curry.
Right, you got a choice. It's like if they're sort of Armenian / Persian, there's just a cloud of axe. Right? You can smell a male coming for miles by his cologne tail. But if he's not that, what does he smell like? Garlic, hummus, body sweat. Yeah, ew. All right, Asians, it's your turn.
They all talk like me.
Right, they have an inability to make an RL transfer, right? And they're always yelling. So
They're horrible tourists.
they're horrible tourists. They come in plagues, like the plagues of Japanese people, and they're super smart.
They're yellow.
Yeah, well, no, it all depends on what kind of Asians we're talking about, right? Like, if you are going to a nail salon, they're going to be Vietnamese, right? If you're going to a convenience store, they're going to be Korean, okay? And they own everything. They own everything quietly. They're very strict, and they live forever. Right? Like, they never die, and they all know karate. Right? All secretly ninjas.
Every picture they take, they do the peace sign.
Which actually isn't a peace sign, by the way. World of Gestures, right? It's a cuckold sign. Did you even get what a cuckold was? All right, so when a man and a woman are married and the man gets cheated on and the woman has a baby, that baby, she has cuckolded him. He's raising another man's baby. In England it's 3, but other places it's 2. It's the rabbit, the cuckold. The rabbit's the sign of the cuckold, because you know how rabbits do. You guys ever see the Jester's hat? They're like this. It's a permanent joke that he's a cuckold. And he's raising someone else's baby. It's called wearing the horn. Oh, so many things no one taught you. But that's okay. You know things about Naruto that I don't know how I have no idea. I can't follow. But that's what this is. It's not a peace sign. It's dirty. Okay. So moving on. I was in China and I was on the Great Wall, and suddenly I was covered in little Chinese schoolgirls, like thousands of them. And they were, so that was happening, and I could not stop laughing because they were I'm like an American. And they were all like, just one day picture with me, and I was like, that'd be fine. And a couple of them tried to get up behind my head, and I was like, you can't even reach. So they were like, okay. So I was doing this over the entire time. They were all like, ah! It was hilarious. All right, so what else do we know? What about Asian women?
They can't open their eyes.
Right, and they're very quiet, right? And they all learn to play violin at like 3.
Yeah.
Right, because of the strict parents. They've got tiger moms. What else do we know?
Hair everywhere.
They buy a lot of iPhones, they can't handle their alcohol.
Hair everywhere.
Hair everywhere?
Yes.
I didn't know this. Tell me this new one.
I was at Six Flags and there was some type of Asian woman. I don't want to be racist. More racist than I've already been. But we're getting like a little trolley and she like lifts up her arm and all I see is bush. Oh my god.
That's actually kind of impressive because for the most part, Asian women don't grow hair very well. I mean, on their head, yes, nowhere else.
I don't know where she was from.
That's
a lot of hair though.
She might be part Canadian, right? She could be German. One of my dear friends, Mariko, is, she's also a duchess in Germany. Because her dad's German, her mom is Japanese, and so she looks completely Japanese. She's a German duchess. You never know, right? We make all these decisions, and you never, ever, ever know. Decide the people in front of you are Vietnamese because you're doing your nails. Maybe. Maybe not. All right. Who else? Who have we not made fun of?
Indeed.
Ah, but which kind though? Dot or feather?
They could have both picked the board.
Right? So if we start with feather, they are respect and protect the earth. They're the ultimate recyclers and they own all the casinos. Right? They make that noise. They are problems.
They throw tomahawks everywhere.
They have a ton of money, all of them. All of them. They live on reservations and they hate the white man. Right? But they know how to take special drugs if you don't know how to take them. Woo! Mescal is a peyote, sorry, not mescal, peyote. Right, the peyote bugs. Yes. What else do we know about them?
They all own casinos.
They own all the casinos and if they're girls, they look like Pocahontas, and if they're guys, they look like old Iron Eyes. And then there's Dot, right? Those are the other Indians, which we're not sure what to do with them because they look like terrorists, but they sound like English people, right? Because they have the English accent, having been colonized. I can't even use the word colonized by Britain. All right. Is there anything we think about them?
They all love curry.
They love the curry, right? And they're tech support. If tech support sounds like that, it must be in India. Couldn't possibly be in London. Do you know the second favorite food in London is curry? Yeah, you go out for a curry. Why? Because like half of London's actually Indian. But we don't tend to think of it that way. What are they here though? What do they tend to be? What's their occupation here? Shut your face, they're your doctors. Right? You look around, they all go to medical school, they're all your doctors. We have all these stereotypes, right? All these things. Now what do we learn from our little discussion here?
I'm racist as hell.
Before you judge yourself harshly, if you go to the Museum of Tolerance, there's a door that says for prejudiced people and another one for non-prejudiced people. Everyone tries to go through the door for non-prejudiced people. It is locked. You cannot open it. And the point they're making is, no. There isn't anyone who doesn't hold an idea about another group of people. In other words, prejudging them. Right? And again, sometimes it could be something not horrific. You may be like, my friend is Mexican. She might enjoy tacos. I shall invite her out for tacos. Right? You don't mean harm. My friend is black. Perhaps he would enjoy some purple-aid. Right? I'll make some before he comes over. You don't mean harm, but you still do dumb shit. That's it. All I'm asking you to do is get to know the person in front of you, not their earwax. right? Not the stuff they've got no control over at all. Get to know who they are. Maybe they are in fact a dick, and you don't want any part of them. Maybe they're cool. Maybe they hold some ideas that you were like, oh, well, that's fairly typical. But judge them on the basis of themselves. So again, I'm not telling you to start hugging and loving your neighbor, get all kumbaya. Like, not like, hey, we're all one. We are all one, but some of us are dicks. So, you know, act accordingly. Now, we like to think of ourselves as colorblind. Oh, when Obama got elected, it was quite a day. Thank you, Lord. Right, I know. You know, what's funny is that I lived in an all-black neighborhood when he got elected.
I'm so sorry.
No, it was great. I loved living there. I loved living there. It was great. I had neighbors I could borrow a cup of sugar from.
Because we always had it.
Not just that, because you'd open your damn door. Because if you made too much food, you being my neighbors, if my neighbors made too much food, they'd knock on my door and ask me if I wanted some. Right? If I was suddenly at a loss for childcare, hey, guess what? A neighbor would step up. It was awesome, and I did it on purpose because I already knew this. And I was like, I would like to live in a warmer neighborhood, thank you. And I was the white woman. Like, that was it. It often was referred to as the white woman. Well, it did distinguish me from everyone else. We all had the same condo. It's exactly the same house over and over again. I was the white woman. And of course, I had the white kid. And, you know, that was it. We were the white people. But when Obama got elected, I was out on my back porch, smoke I do, not anymore, but like I did, hiding from my son, pretending I wasn't smoking, very effectively, I might add. So, these teenagers come running by and they go, hey, white lady! And I assume they meant me, because there were no other white ladies around. And they're like, how do you like it? We got a black president now. How are you gonna like being enslaved? And I was like, you've made a false assumption about what is going to be cause and effect here. I voted for him. And I'm excited that we're going to have a president that embraces change, that he's African American is so much the better. And they're like, words. No, basically what they said was, fuck you, you're gonna get lynched and a bunch of other stuff. For a second, I was scared. Like, for a second, I was like, uh-oh, am I going to be targeted based on the color of my skin? You know, something that as a white woman I rarely have to consider, right? Automatic white privilege. Something called white privilege. I don't often have this fear. Not because I shouldn't, but because it doesn't occur to me. And I was like, oh, am I in trouble? And then I was like, I know these boys' mamas. I am not in trouble, right? I would walk over to their mamas and they would get their asses worked. And that's basically what I did. I walked over to their mamas and I was like, your boys threatened me today, and I can't imagine that they actually meant it. And I was like, no, they're just kidding with the whole black president thing. And I'm like, yeah, I'm totally with you on that. Doesn't mean we start chasing down lying. That's the exact opposite of what needs to happen here. And they were like, well, maybe a little chasing away. Okay, maybe a little. I'll run. So we talk about what race actually is and isn't. Anthropology as a whole, the discipline of anthropology says that there's no such thing as a subspecies within humans, right? Which is what race would really have to be. We don't have that. Race isn't really a valid biological category. Now, does that mean that there's no such thing as a cluster of traits that people from the same area share? No, of course, it's stupid. Of course there is. I'm from Northern Europe, right? My people are. I have a big ass freaking rib cage. Like, I'm holding it in, don't look. I have a huge rib cage. I have a long nasal passage. I have light eyes so that I can see in the dark in a place where it may be dark 6 months out of every year. By nature, I have light hair so that I can absorb what little sun I can get out of that weak thing, which is where I come from, right? That doesn't mean that I wear a string of pearls or I like mayo. right? It means I have this cluster of characteristics. So anthropologists have worked very, very hard as a group to sort of debunk what race is and what race isn't. Now that's good, and in some ways is making up for the shit they did to begin with. Culture anthropologists, right? All about colonialism and how better to capture and subjugate people. Physical anthropologists, they're measuring people to try and figure out how race creates behavior. Oh, Ruth Benedict, directly responsible for Japanese internment. Directly responsible. So we had an ugly, dark history, and after we woke up from our drunken stupor, where we participated in this, justification of racism, we don't do that anymore. We come out with sort of a statement on race. So we say that race is a cultural construct. So this doesn't mean that it has no meaning, but it means it has no biological meaning. So variations have to do with the environment, not with any actually inherent behavioral thing like people had previously said. Now there is one branch of anthropology that still uses race as a valid category, if you will, and that is forensic anthropology. Forensic anthropology still uses race. Now, why might that be? I am a forensic anthropologist. Why would that be? Because I have to get at how people might identify themselves. On my driver's license, it says white, right? Which is actually kind of bullshit, because how I identify myself, well, as it turns out, that's ethnicity. That's not biology. What I'm looking at as the forensic anthropologist is biology. Where is this person adapted to live? That leaves marks in the skeleton. It doesn't really tell me how the person saw themselves, any more than when a cop says, hey, what was the dead person's gender? I can't answer that question. I have no idea. Gender and sex are not connected, necessarily. So I can tell you whether they were born with an innie or an outie, but I can't tell you how they felt about themselves. Right? So when they say, oh, what was that person's ethnicity? I have no idea. Right? All right, stop hacking. I still have you for 7 more minutes, so relax, Max. So, when we actually look at biological variation, there's more variation within populations than between them. In other words, first of all, skin color is a very, very small part of our DNA. But the other thing is, our actual biological variation is extraordinarily minimal. You could find a random person from Nairobi, and chances are good we could exchange a kidney, a body part. I may have a harder time exchanging with someone from the hometown in Germany where my people come from, but I may be able to find a random person in Nairobi, because there's more variation within populations than between them. This is an example of seriously crappy racism. This guy's name was Oda Benga, and Oda was captured in the Congo. He belonged to a group of people we call the Mbute, but he was actually, we call them now the Mbute. At the time we called them pygmies. Never call anyone a pygmy, it's rude. He was, however, really short, because he was an Mbute, and the Mbute are tiny. He was only like 4'11", and actually for an Mbute, he was really tall. Their average size is 4'6", including the women. So he gets exhibited in 1904 with a bunch of other fellow pygmies in St. Louis after he was captured, and he was 23. The missionary who helped with the capture returned Oda to his homeland, but only to collect more artifacts for the Smithsonian. Then he brought him back to New York. And then the guy rebroke. There is still a whole wing in the Smithsonian that has stuff that Oda brought back. Unfortunately, when he went broke, the first thing that he did was the people, because he left him stranded in New York City, the people in New York City had no idea what to do with the government, so they put him in the Bronx Zoo. They put him in the monkey house, and he had to live with an orangutan. By the way, it's certainly dangerous, man. That's like That is worse than Orange is the New Black. And so he eventually people have a big hue and cry, and they let him out during the day, and then for a while they put him in the museum, and then eventually they put him in an orphanage for black kids. At this point, he's over 30. Right. Eventually he figures out he's never going home, and he shoots himself in the chest. Yeah, and this was all because they looked at Oda like he was non-human. That is not atypical of relationships that are based, where people are making assumptions based on race. Because the very, very, very first part that comes out this is, there is a right way and a wrong way to be. And that somehow race is reflective of moral character, or ideas, or penis length, or drink you like to have, or parking ability. Understand that as cute and funny as those things sound when we're all laughing about them together, they can lead to this, or worse. Remember, 6 million people died as a result of a mistaken understanding of genetics that they said is directly related to race and ability. It's not a joke, man. People die. People died last week because of this shit. So it's desperately important that you understand what race does and does not mean. And it's also desperately important to understand that this isn't over. We can sit here in these college classrooms and go, wouldn't judge someone on earwax, why would I judge them on their melanin count? Right? That's dumb. But it doesn't change the situation if you're driving on black, does it? Does not. So it's still a very real problem for us. Now, what's our responsibility? Our responsibility is not necessarily to educate people about our ethnicity or about our culture personally, but our responsibility is to stand up for each other. When decisions are being made about somebody, whether or not they could be criminal based on melanocytes, or whether or not they're a credible witness based on earwax, I need you to stand up and go, bullshit. Bullshit. Also, skin color designation, how arbitrary is that? I'm a white woman, right? There are brown women in this room who are lighter than me as a white woman. It's arbitrary. It is completely arbitrary. Now go check out, we'll finish the conversation. Oh wait, before you go,